honor to be here. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll begin a little as she's getting her clicker. I'll talk about this. I'm so glad that was exactly the theme of this lecture when I talk about every second counts. And I really talk about the different chapters. I had to ask myself, like, why did I get invited back here? And I don't necessarily think it's like imposter syndrome, and definitely not a lack of confidence. But really I'd ask, is it because of my accolades? Is it because, oh, once you get into Harvard, your alma mater will ask you to come back and chat because they're so proud of you, even though this place had a much bigger impact on who I am and I'm more proud of my role here as an undergraduate than necessarily that master's degree? Or is it because I'm an ER doctor, and being an ER doctor is popular right now? The pit's out. There's a billion-dollar industry dedicated to depicting medicine in the hospital for your guys' entertainment and multiple Grey's Anatomy and everything. Is it the social medicine, or is it the fact that I'm an educator? And so I had a lot of these things, and in the grand scheme of things, I said, let's just talk about it all. And so we'll go through the chapters of my life to try and instill all these different parts of who I am and lessons I've learned, and then I will end it with what I'm most proud of right now, and that's my roles at University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences. One is a clinical director for their emergency medicine clerkship. That is when you come into the emergency department, or not when you come to the emergency department, when you come to medical school, your first 2 years are typically didactics, anatomy, biochemistry, virology, and then you take your first step of boards, and then we let you into the hospital, 3 to run. And you do your surgery rotations, your internal medicine rotations. When you do your emergency medicine rotation, at this point, I will be your clinical director. In 2028, we're gonna move toward a mandatory clerkship model, so I will touch every student who walks through the door at Arkansas, and because we're the only medical school in the state, I champion myself as responsible for the entire state of Arkansas's emergency medicine curriculum. And I really take it with a huge ownership. I love my role. And then the second part is I'm very proud of my role as this hospital-based violence intervention program, Project HEAL. And these will be discussed at the end of my lecture more at length, but essentially Project HEAL and a hospital-based violence intervention programs are a novel concept. Maybe 5 or 6 years ago, the first one came out of Oakland. The first one in Houston started in 2023. It's an exciting idea of we're reducing gun violence by changing the cycle of violence, intervening on the cycle of violence. And the place where hospitals and doctors have the easiest shot at it is when they're a patient in their setting. That is, victims of gun violence come in and we're trying to provide resources and interventions to them to stop the cycle of violence and recidivism and re-injury. In doing this role, while that's the reason we got funding, that's my job on this is about funding and making sure we're doing it right, I got to hear some testimonies that really gave me insight into what it means to be a social medicine advocate, work in health equity, and we probably will be able to get the data to prove this doesn't cause re-injury or recidivism, and I think we can continue to get funding. We've made it this far in this year, which is particularly scary. The big deal is there's about 50 participants who maybe we didn't change the world, but we changed the world for 50 people. And I really am proud of that role and how big of an impact it had on the individuals in the program, as opposed to the impact it had on the data that would give us more funding and expanding the project. So there's a bit 2 parts here. Okay, you got a clicker? Okay, perfect. All right. Oh, perfect. All right, so back to the theme here is making the most of every chapter is, and I really talk about every second counts. And she hit the nail, Dr. Laveau-Haley hit the nail on the head with the idea that I really did immerse myself in University of Houston. And it could be, there's a fear there, is like, is this a detriment to my grades? Is this a detriment to my MCAT studying? Because you can do all the things in the world to all my pre-meds. You cannot fix your GPA or MCAT. Like, you can't extracurricular way into medical school. We got to make sure you're getting those grades. And if you have to take a couple years, that's even better. Your average age of acceptance is getting upwards of 25 and 26, and we expect that you guys take a little bit of time off in between there. I went straight through. Being a 22-year-old medical student was not easy. Next one. And then, so here are my chapters. I'll talk about Houston, Howard University, College of Medicine, Mayo Clinic, Harvard, all the steps. And then I'll talk about health equity and my role in social medicine at Harvard. And during that George Floyd and the pandemic, there was a huge emphasis on social medicine, huge. It started my career was entirely engulfed in this, and I was part of that. And I want to talk about that experience. And then we'll talk about University of Arkansas and my role there, and then Project HEAL. So chapter 1, I'm from San Antonio. I went to Judson High School. We were state champion. We weren't state championships. We lost in the state championship. It's still painful to talk about. But I grew up in low income. This is a house I spent part of my childhood in. half black, half Mexican. This is my family here, and my youngest sister has a severe disability. And so a big part of my life is being raised in this setting. This is my husband, CJ Fowler's in the audience with us. He's a Baptist pastor and at an LGBT affirming Baptist church in Little Rock, one of the only in the state. And I met him when I was doing my master's in public health and he was doing his master's in divinity. And so we're now at Houston, chapter 2. And I'm going to fly through some of these because I want to see you guys pictures and I really want to give time to the end chapter, which is what I'm doing at University of Arkansas. As Dr. Laveau Haley said, I dived in. I get hyped. You can get me hyped so quick. And so Model Arab League was one of the funnest things I've did. And now, especially in the modern political climate, I could not be more grateful for what that experience did for me. Speaking skills. Now I see that you guys win awards every year, but I was an honorable mention delegate for Kuwait, and I thought I had won the Super Bowl. I went home, swagged out, so hyped about that. It was a powerful experience for me. And now I see your guys' wall of trophies. Trophy season seems to be alive and well here in Houston. I was an Invisible Children's program founding president. I started this program. I've heard about it in high school. It's kind of got out of popularity as we understand the complexities of the Ugandan conflict. But at the time, I have to give myself credit, I was really passionate about it. And we did do fundraising. If you want to do Pi of Prof, Morrison will make you the most money every time. No pressure. And I was the director of orientation team. I was an OT member, and then I became the director. And then I lost that job because I'm not really good at management. I'm good at leadership, but I think I was a little bit too much, and props to the mentors and my boss there. She taught me so many lessons, but I needed to lose that job. And then I was a student services employee where I was really got excellent mentorship under Jody Kostage, Brenda Roden, Sarah Bojani were huge impacts on me. And I think these extracurriculars and these extra things I did had a bigger impact on me than any of the courses, except for maybe some of these human sit courses I'll talk to you about. And I was honors ambassador president. I think a lot of my speaking skills and hype comes from that. I studied abroad in Mexico. I strongly encourage you guys to do it. I also strongly encourage you to learn how to speak Spanish. If you're thinking of being a doctor and you're serious about it, you should probably pick up Spanish. A few things you can do that will help you in clinical practice from this day to that point will help you more than Spanish. And so no pressure. And then lastly, I did a summer medical dental education program at Yale where it was a minority pipeline program, and it was the first time I was exposed to a large group of minorities, African-American minorities. And I say that now, and I think I want to stop and give you guys applause. Houston is diverse. I hope you guys really settle in and look around and appreciate where you're at right now and what it looks like to be in this classroom looking at you. And to even have a slight inkling of like, oh, I didn't necessarily appreciate it while here. I'm a little embarrassed about it because this is true diversity, and I appreciate what Houston does for you guys here. But it was my first time seeing a large portion of African Americans in a high education setting. And it inspired my next chapter, which was, let me take a step back. It was a big deal for me. Here are some notable classes I took. I did enjoy the human situation. You cannot walk through the walls of Yale or Harvard and not have a reference to these books and these readings. When you get into higher political circles, you need to have reference to these readings in order to have that conversation. And so it was very powerful to me. I did take a Black political thought course with Dr. Laveau Haley. It was eye-opening. At the time, I had an insight in her and I had a great relationship with her. She had a decision as to whether or not, and maybe I'm remembering it different than her, and she can feel free to correct me, but she had to decide between opening up to non-honors college students, which would allow more African-American students in at the time, and then, or keep it at honors college where you have a smaller amount and it's probably not gonna have as many African-American students, and she opened it up. And I, in my Malcolm X phase, of course, found myself at terms of all my honors college friends, my roommates, everyone around me. It was much less African Americans at that time in my class, and African American males particularly struggling with. But what I found is I felt like a divide. There's half the class is non-honors, they know each other. I have never been in class with them, and I'm in this half of the class. And on the first day of class, I walked across the room and sat with the Black people who I didn't know. And I argued on behalf of them, and then one day, one of them was arguing with me, and I look over, I'm like, wait, why are we arguing? And he was a very conservative person. And you can probably guess my politics here, and my politics as a young 19-year-old were even more aggressive. But it was so eye-opening to see somebody think differently than me. I had assumed what it meant to have a minority in front of me, what it meant to be a political theorist. All this was transformed by that class, and I loved it. And I still grow through James Baldwin readings, the introduction to so many others. But I also took a Spartan class with Dr. Sue Collins. She's at Duke now. It was when the movie 300 came out. It's what inspired me to become a history major. I needed it to become a history major to take that class and really keep on to that. And lastly, I studied abroad and helped with my Spanish. And Medicine Society was huge. Medicine Society was the first time I was exposed to disparities, research, health equity, social medicine, even things like the hierarchy within medicine, nursing, and intercollegiality between nursing, dentistry, medicine to have outcomes for your patients. Now, after University of Houston, this is a book I was gifted by Dr. Gunther. I took her genocide course. I probably should have mentioned that in the last slide, but she sent me this beautiful book. I read it over the summer. It's like a 700-page book. Isabel Wilkerson won the Pulitzer Prize for this, and her next book, Caste, is really popular as well. And this book is about the Great Migration, and she likened my journey to going to Howard, an historically black college or university. And mind you, at the time, this consumed me. My race consumed me so much at this time. And she gave me this book, and I found myself in that book. I love this book. It's still on my shelf. That's the letter. I took this picture of this maybe 3 days ago. I still have the letter in the book. So good luck finding mentors who can do what she's done for me. But I've been all over the place. Howard University College of Medicine, the Mayo Clinic. I did a residency in emergency medicine there. It's in Rochester, Minnesota. It's the #1 graduate program in the country and the #1 hospital in the country. So at that point, I had a high degree of accolades, and then I went on with that to Harvard Medical School, where I did an education fellowship so that I could teach again, and then also a master's in public health, and then I stayed on for faculty for 3 years. And then finally, I moved to University of Arkansas, and I'll talk more about that. So Howard University College of Medicine was life-changing, life-affirming, all the above. If you have a chance to touch foot on campus, touch the soil. It's historic. The ancestors are looking down on me, and I hope I'm making them proud. It was very powerful. Obama, I'm a history major, so I want to highlight the context of me being in DC. For the first time in my life, my high school is majority black. It probably still is, but not as much. It was consuming, and I know this is excessively talking about race, but at the time, if I was honest about what was on my mind and what made me go to Howard, this is what was on my mind. But Obama was the president at the time. The motorcade stopped you from work. Everyone's happy about it. Like, sorry, I'm 20 minutes late to lecture. The motorcade came, and it's like, oh, that's cool. Like, this was an exciting time to be in DC. He was my commencement speaker. This is actually a picture out of his book, where if you hold up a president's book while they're giving a speech, they're probably going to take a picture of you. And then I was vice president of my class, where I had to give the graduation speech for our class, and I was honored to do that. So I have some speaking experience. I was well received at Howard, but I also struggled at Howard. It's hard to go, I'll be honest, it's hard to go from history major and then a biochemistry class with a PhD in biochemistry right next to you taking the same test. They kicked my butt and they dragged me through the mud, but they also nurtured me through that and made me better. And by the end of it, I felt like I was really growing up straight and understand the impact of what I was setting out to do, and that is training to be a doctor. This concept of race, this obsession with race, this obsession with who I was in an educational setting, I suddenly began to develop what's next, right? And that brings me to another thing that happened at Howard is I chose emergency medicine. I originally wanted to do international medicine, invisible children, where we were trying to intervene on Ugandans' conflict. And so emergency medicine seemed like an easy way to do that, but I was the president of the international medicine interest group at Howard, and I had an existential crisis. Was I just a poor kid from San Antonio trying to go on vacation to places I've never been or never seen and never thought I would have access to under the guise of helping people? And secondly, I have all these people in the third ward across the street who I can speak the same language to, understand their issues, understand the complexity of the issues. Why am I spending all my time and money sending stuff all the way to Africa where I don't actually have a connection to this? And if I showed up on I'd probably do harm to them by thinking I could fix their problems. And so I no longer want to do international medicine. This happened while I was at Howard, but I did fall in love with emergency medicine. And for those pre-meds in the class, I'll give my shameless plug to my specialty real quick. There's a huge versatility of practice. You can practice in any city. There's level 1 trauma centers. A majority of doctors are actually practicing in smaller community settings where you're more likely to get an ankle sprain than a gunshot wound. There's urgent cares if you don't like nights and weekends. And so there's opportunities to diversify your practice and find ways in which you like it. And you can also diversify your patient population and choose where you want to work based off of that. I've never felt bad for somebody who went into residency and didn't enjoy being an ER doctor. They figured it out. It's a good job. It's public service and utility. If anyone asks outside, we need a doctor, they're explicitly saying they need an emergency medicine physician. There are a few specialties where they're like, All right, okay, you can come on. All right, fine. But for the most part, an ER doctor is very useful in that setting. At the very least, I can tell you when and when not to go to the ER. I can tell you what you expect there. And my family, they skipped the line in the ER. One time I was in Arkansas, and my grandmother-in-law, who I love dearly, had a cut on her arm. Nothing serious. She wasn't going to die. So I'll come to the waiting room and sit in there with you. They clowned me for hours for having my grandma in the waiting room next to these patients who come every day. And so I love that. I'm very proud of my ability to have anyone in my church be my patient. Anyone can be my patient. It's a very broad, I'm not pediatrics where I'm narrowing my patient population. There's good job security. All data shows that more people are using the ER. It's not going away. And I'll highlight that I really love my patients. I love my patient population. I quote the Colossus on the Statue of Liberty, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, because I feel like that. We have a marginalized group of vulnerable population frequenting the emergency department. There's a homeless population, a substance abuse population. If you don't like these patients, don't go into emergency medicine. If you don't like the 19-year-old who wasted your time with a pinky cut because she thought she was gonna die from it, get out of the specialty. If you don't like telling somebody their mother's going to die today, if you don't like delivering a baby and being part of their life for that, this isn't the specialty for you. But if you do, if you really love your patients, I find so much reward for it. I also don't make fun of my patients. You can't tell a joke about my patients in front of me. It's a rule I have. Like, I didn't think that was funny. And in my attending hood, I have the ability to control the setting of my team with that. It's also a huge platform, huge moments. I talked about delivering babies, announcing death. You are the supporting character in that story. They will always remember every word you say. And so it's high stakes medicine. That platform of conversation is such a high stake manner. I assume they're gonna remember this moment forever, so I'm very careful about how I manage it. And then it's fun to teach. This is my mentor. I'm always gonna give a mentorship shout out. Dr. Robinson was my mentor at Howard. He's the first black man to interview me for a role. He's a big part of me. He's the reason I went to Mayo Clinic. I call it a Mayo Clinicophile. I was a young 25-year-old telling him I would rather go to Chicago, Cook County, because that's where the show ER comes off of, and because I was a newly out the closet gay man who needed a big city like Chicago. And I can hear his, gritting his teeth, I know he didn't come in here to talk about dancing in Chicago instead of practicing medicine at the Mayo Clinic. And so he's the reason I went. First man I came out the closet to. He passed away in 2021. I called him maybe every day, 6 times a week at least, for the last 2 years of his life. I had an excellent relationship with him. He's a father figure to me. And so I pay homage to him. And then I went to the Mayo Clinic. And this is me on a short commute to work. Rochester, Minnesota, and Minneapolis are one of the coldest cities in the country. I didn't hate the cold as much as I hated being in a small town. The Mayo Clinic was started by the Mayo brothers, which is called the Mayo Clinic, and they're inspirational in the way they spoke about medicine. There's a cultural part of the Mayo Clinic that everyone else in medicine kind of looks at like, that's weird, and that's over there. Because most of the major academic centers are lined up on the East Coast. Is 30 miles from Harvard, go another 50 miles, you got Yale, go another 20 miles, you got all these major institutions that are 50 miles from each other. Mayo Clinic is like 100 miles from the nearest competitor, let alone probably 300 miles from the nearest serious academic institution like Cleveland Clinic. And these guys really took ownership of that. And they announced the 3 shields. If you look at the symbol, I keep pointing down, but the symbol below the Mayo Clinic, there's 3 shields. It's education, research, and clinical care. And I took that with heavy heart, and you can see how that impacted me as I go into my profession in Arkansas, how I always feel the need to have 3 shields on. I was well received in Minnesota. That was a picture of me receiving an award. I was Educator of the Year. I'm wearing the pin right now. I will want to tell you that what you're getting here, you're being trained well here. You're gonna go off and you're gonna succeed. You're gonna excel in any institution in the country, and I felt that when I proved that to myself when I got to the Mayo Clinic. I had a lot of insecurities at this time. And living in Rochester, Minnesota was tough. But I also liken this part to, I was becoming a man. I became a professional. It was at Mayo Clinic where I started to stop thinking about my demographic and who I was and start thinking about what job I needed to do and what I was going to set out to accomplish at the age of 17 and 16 applying to undergrad. I also quote, this is a book by Paul Monette. He is a graduate of Yale. His famous book he wrote was Borrowed Time. It's a beautiful book about his husband dying from the HIV/AIDS crisis. And this book is the sequel or prequel, but it was written after the fact, and it's called Becoming a Man. It's this whole experience of him growing up until he eventually meets his husband, and that was the moment he became a man. It's gonna make me tear up. It's hype. And so it was very powerful to me. I loved it. I also did an abroad trip. I'm still very passionate about international medicine, to Bolivia, and not a clinical abroad trip. I wasn't going over there to tell them I'm gonna save your lives here. I went to go educate their kids, and so I spent 12 weeks in Hospital Univalle. Those are the students with my broken, terrible Spanish, but I worked through it. They loved me. I slept in a hospital. Me, who can afford a house and a garage in Minnesota at this point in my life, was sleeping it with medical students. But I initially was staying in the hospital, and one of these Bolivian students came up to me and says, "Oof, that's tough. Why don't you come stay with me and my family?" Mind you, he had 7 brothers living in that household. It was a 3-bedroom household. And they let me stay, and they treated me like king. I got my own room, which was crazy to me. And it was a much better living situation. And now I had 3 brothers in the medical school with me, and his girlfriend was a medical student. His name is Octavio Lazaro. He was huge impact on my life, and he was such a good medical student in that medical school. And similarly, I felt like, oh, did I do that at University of Houston, where this medical school is culture, their accountability, their motivation is being funneled through him as a leader of it. I went back to Mayo Clinic, and I was so proud of what they were doing down there. These students are running the hospital. There's no residency programs in Bolivia. So the students are doing all the medicine. He was going and driving to people's houses at a 12-hour shift, like 6 families' houses, be like, hey, I told you to pick up that medicine. Did you get it? I know it costs money, but you need to get it. And holding patients accountable, like crazy extracurriculars, and not even like asking for credit. I had to ask him why he was coming back late so late one night, and he told me about it. Well, he eventually had aspirations to go to Mayo Clinic. He would eventually match 2 years later at the Mayo Clinic after coming up and doing a rotation. So did his brother, and his wife is also there. They're now in Minnesota, and one of the honors of my life has been to say, I just got you from Bolivia, one of the poorest Latin American countries and the lowest educational access in the country, to come up to the #1 hospital in the world, the Mayo Clinic. I remember walking, and he saw me with those 3 shields on my chest, and in Spanish, he's like, how did you know, you're at the Mayo Clinic, this is incredible. Do people know you're at the Mayo Clinic? And for him to be able to practice it up there and to change his experience, that hospital's experience, and that medical school's experience has been an honor. One more mentorship shout out. This is Dr. Annie Sadasi. She is a huge mentor of mine. She was the chair of the emergency department at Mayo Clinic, and then went on to be vice chair of the institution. Now she's at Henry Ford in Detroit after a long, incredible career at Mayo Clinic. She'd be so proud if she was with me right now. She's alive, but she's in Detroit and couldn't make it. But she's self-described born of a silver spoon, double ophthalmology, League parent household, and she was a huge impact on me. So I always mention this because, of course, the last mentor I talked about at Howard matched my demographic, but you're gonna have to, not at some point, I would immediately urge you to consider mentorship with different demographics and run toward that opportunity. And more important, if you're a mentor thinking of a mentee, encourage finding mentees of different demographics, because the insightfulness, the impact is huge and powerful. And then I went for Mayo Clinic. I had a lot of swag. I applied to Harvard, and I felt like I should get in, and I did get in. I applied for a medical education fellowship. Mayo Clinic really teased out my desire to teach. I love teaching. I will line up to have the chance to teach you. And so it's an honor to be able to do so. But I did an education fellowship so that I can teach medical students. I graduated also with a public degree from there. Harvard has a beautiful medical school, which is completely unnecessary because at this point we have to practice medicine. And I also want to highlight the person on the far left is Claudine Gay. She's the first African-American president of Harvard system, and she lasted maybe 4 months. I'm sure some of you guys saw this in the news, because I want to talk about the context at which I was in Boston. This was right at the beginning, right before the pandemic I landed. A majority of the first 2 years was consumed by my experience of the pandemic and George Floyd in a very blue city in a bubble. And then that happened, moved on, and then October 7th happened, and right around the time we got our first black female president. And losing her cut me deep. But more importantly, the culture on campus was toxic and terrifying for everyone. It was a tough time to work there. My husband was a divinity major or master's student, and The Divinity School was one of the few seminary schools that had multiple religions in it in the country, if not the only one. For example, if you go to Yale, it's a Christian divinity school. Harvard has any religion possible there. And so there's a mixture of all these religions, and forgive me if I'm misspeaking, CJ, but all these religions in one classroom, in one cohort. And it was challenging. It was very angsty. It was very much part of our existence. And I want to just pay homage to that and Claudine Gay for being the inspiration she was to me. I also got into health equity and social medicine around this time, and it was popular. It launched my career. For my grand rounds at Mayo Clinic in 2018, gave a lecture on race in medicine. It was consuming to me at the time because of Rochester, Minnesota. I was the only black resident at the time. And then I had a fully prepared lecture series on how to disseminate data on racial disparities that have been around for 2 decades and have not been disseminated in medical school education. And it was well received across the board. I gave tons of publications, including the New England Journal of Medicine, as well as tons of chances at national lectures. And so a big part of my career was social medicine and health equity. Now my role after finishing my fellowship, which was my fellowship capstone project was that education initiative. I became faculty at Harvard for 3 years. I had multiple roles there. One, I am a clinician. I'm an emergency room physician. I do have to spend my time doing that. I was the assistant clerkship director at Harvard, so instead of the clerkship director, I was just right below that. And then there were some big roles, and I talk about a leadership vacuum that were present, and they didn't have anybody who could fill those roles. And one of them was chair of the LGBTQ+ Dean's Advisory Committee, which essentially I was a faculty chair and there was a staff chair. I had one-on-one time with 4 deans once a month. And it was to advise them. I did a retreat. I was in charge and representative of a 5-hospital system, 4 schools worth of the dental school, medical school, school of public health, et cetera. And all the training programs in all these hospitals and specialties, I was now on an umbrella leadership position to advocate on their behalf. And so I really started to tease into how my role here as a leader could impact these students and trainees and staff and faculty. I was also the director of diversity recruitment, which I will speak of now because I had a director role. And the director of diversity recruitment was tasked with diversifying Harvard. That was my role. And not with just go accept more of this minority or that underrepresented minority. It was do it in a way that would be responsible. And so I laid abed at night, lots of times thinking at the ceiling, as in now I have a role. One day I'll argue that you guys are going to be given $1 million and a title, and they're going to tell you, go fix that problem you've been complaining about for the last 10 years of your life. And it's going to be daunting because these problems aren't easy to fix. And so with that being said, the first thing I did was go to the literature, as I would recommend any potential healthcare professional, always go to the literature. And I found all these different ideas and concepts, but this was my big recap after maybe reading through 24 papers over the course of a month because I wanted to present a proposal. And they asked for a compensated role or panel. This is an idea to avoid the minority tax. That is, a lot of minorities are being tasked with recruitment, admission priorities, mentorship at a higher burden than their white counterparts because of the lack of other minorities in the profession. I'm a little bit, who's taxing me to take care of my people at this point, right? And I don't truly believe in that now, but I was compensated at Harvard. We already had a scholarship for second looks. We already I understand the diversity snowball effect. Once you get black people, more black people come. Next, I keep highlighting black and Hispanic because I'm half black and half Mexican. But there are other obvious admission priorities. And we also started to aggregate the minorities into, especially the Asian category, into more accurate depictions of what we were trying to represent here. It was consuming. I admit it's a little jarring to talk about it now, but I also had to take a step back and ask, what am I actually doing here? An honest question, like, why am I doing this? These students, I'm not saving anyone's life. These students are already done with medical school. They've already going to match. These are fellows we're trying to pull in. These are doctors. And if they don't come here, they're going to go to Yale. They're going to go to an institution. They're going to go to the family's institution. They're not for a lack of a job. And so am I working for Harvard just to boost their numbers? Also, there's 270 programs in emergency medicine in the country. there were less black male physicians going into the match per year than that. So every time we get 3, somebody else isn't getting 1. And I'd say Houston, Atlanta, New York City, Harvard, Yale, we're gonna get ours. I can recruit well here. But does that mean Iowa, who has a substantial African-American population, will they ever get an African-American resident to go recruit over there? So I had these huge questions about what was I doing here and why was I doing it? And then I had asked, well, if it's not for the institution, it's not for society, is it for the student, right? At the end of the day, I do care. If a student wanted to come to Harvard and they thought it was actually the best training program for them and they said, I'm not coming because I'm not comfortable there, that's not good. I wanted to fix that. Geography was a big deal. I laugh about this because Boston's not easy to recruit to. It's cold up there, and a lot of people in Alabama thought we were racist, which is hilarious because I always turn around and be like, dang, can y'all vote over there? Like, am I having to argue that he's a bit? But it's always those racists over there. It's always those racists over there, and I think it became so apparent to me. Is it the prestige? What are you going to do with that Harvard degree? You're still going to practice medicine. Are you really trying to do what I'm trying to do, and that is become an educator or a dean, or are you just trying to practice medicine? Because I don't actually think that prestige is necessary to go across the country, people don't know, to a city you're not from, to treat patients that are not part of your community. And then lastly, will they enjoy it and fit in? Are you going to get microregress here? Is that why you're coming? Because it's a safe space for you? These are low bars, admittedly, right? Very, very low bars. And I came up with the conclusion that the actual reason I need them to come here is because they think this is the best possible professional setting for them. Like, this is where my career starts. Not, oh, they have a nice diversity program, they're feeding us fried catfish on Fridays, or they have a lot of African Americans in the department. I needed to convince them that Harvard was where you're going to get the best training. And this was kind of my point of attack. So my role on the committee was to interview every medical student who comes through. It was a big task. I know very much well all these medical students who went through there, and I read their applications to and fro and took notes extensively. And what it allowed me to do is start every single interview with, hey, I'm a big fan of yours. President of this, every accolade you've ever done, I could list it out to you. And then I'd ask them what they want to do with their career. And because I was so familiar with their application, I had already prepared the answer. And they'll tell me, oh, I'm interested in sickle cell research. It's like, interesting, we have Dr. So-and-so with an entire sickle cell research center. I'm going to send you an email with his email to make sure you guys have a chance to connect. Oh, you're interested in education. Well, there's this education fellowship and a master's in education you can get at Harvard School of Education. And I built this incredible relationship with them in a 15-minute time slot. And if you ever get into recruitment, this is how you recruit. You find out what they need professionally, and you try to adjust to that. And there were times when I'm like, I don't think Harvard's for you. You know, like if you're trying to treat low-income gun violence victims, Boston's not a gun and knife club. You got to go to South Chicago for that. And we've had those conversations. But it was powerful, and I loved that role. I took ownership of it. I have a lot of mentees that came out of that because guess what? Once they got there, once we did match them, we increased, I can give you the data points and say, our URIM and diversity went up, and that was the whole point of all this, and that's why I needed funding. But the reality is every student who went through there that year had a nice exposure with me in which they had somebody who looked like them, who could appreciate them, who read through their entire application to and fro and could give them career advice related to Harvard and their role at Harvard. Another big part of my experience there was Dr. Freeman Hrabowski. I only met him once. He was the president of University of Maryland, Baltimore College. He's one of the best presidents in the country, per his Wikipedia page. He came in and gave the Martin Luther King commemorative lecture at Harvard. And I am taking way too long on this, but I love this man. And when he came and gave that speech, I felt like inspired to work harder. I felt like I could be better. I felt like I touched the feet of a prophet. I really felt that way. He is at University of Maryland, Baltimore College, which has educated more African Americans and put them into STEM, MD, PhD programs than any other program in the country for his 10-year tenure that he described. And that is better than Howard, Meharry, Morehouse, actually historically black colleges. He's doing a better job with a name brand that is not comparable to Harvard, with University of Maryland, Baltimore College. And he came in and told us how he did it. And the first thing he said was science begets scientist. That if you want a student to go do a research project, you need to do a research project and include the student. And that is such a powerful part of who I am now and also correlates with the 3 shields. And he also quoted, we do have high expectations at University of Maryland, Baltimore College, but not for them, for us. And he has a TED Talk. I encourage you guys to look him up. He's a powerful part of me. I also had other mentors I want to talk about. I had access to deans at Harvard, which is powerful. This is Dean Alden Landry and Dean Joan Reed, who are big mentors for me. Very appreciative of them. And I'll briefly talk about working during the pandemic. This is a tough thing to always talk about because it was the least fun thing I've ever done in my life. We did not enjoy it. There's phase one, we were in lockdown, where luckily ER doctors still could work. If you were a dermatologist, you weren't working because it's way too risky for a dermatologist to open up their clinic. But there wasn't any patients yet. Nobody was coming to the ER because nobody wants to be in the ER where COVID is. And meanwhile, all the restaurants are giving us food and accolades. There was like a parade when you walk out the hospital and you're like, oh my God, I literally didn't work today. I sat there at the desk checking emails. So that was phase one. The frontline guilt is what we call it. And then phase two was the limited supplies, which was the absolute worst. We ran out of tests. I talked about this in my speech, having to turn around, not people at the major academic center in Cambridge. No, when I worked my shifts in East Boston where the Hispanic population is, these are the patients where we ran out of tests. This was the hospital where we ran out of tests. And through a language barrier, I had explained to people that we're not going to test you, just go home and isolate. Well, it's really hard to isolate when you're in a multi-generational family household with 3 rooms, and a multi-generational household is that your grandparents live with you, your parents live with you, your kids live with you. And they didn't have the access. Unless they knew they had COVID, they weren't going to isolate for any sniffle, and they also needed to work. And so they would go back to the warehouse unless they knew they had COVID. So we're sending people back with the idea that, oh, without this COVID diagnosis, you're going right back on public transportation without personal protective equipment to these big settings. And quickly we realized that this was where the pandemic would take off and really consume us. And we fixed it. There was a time period, maybe 2 days in Boston, where we had to ship in ventilators because we were running out. We were having to make the difficult decision to say, you're going to have to breathe without full oxygen right now while she gets a ventilator, and we'll switch it in 6 hours. Things like that, crazy times. And then vaccine administration was a big part of our career. It was a nice thing to volunteer for. And now, I wanted to spend more time on this, but I have not run through my slides well enough to be able to give myself time. I'm proud to have made it from there to the University of Arkansas. The reason I went to Arkansas was part of what Freeman Hrabowski put on me, in that he's at University of Maryland, Baltimore, making change that he felt impactful. And here I am up in Cambridge, not doing the same thing. And so I was happy to go to a state institution instead of a private institution. I'm an emergency room physician there. I like the patient population. It's low income. Arkansas is one of the poorest states in the country. It's one of the highest rates of food insecurity in the country. And it's rural. A lot of patients are coming into the only level 1 trauma center in the state. The clerkship director for emergency medicine. These are students who are so grateful to have me. And I'm a chief academic house advisor, and I'm the clinical director for Project Heal. So real quick, the Arkansas population, I'll skip through this. I really appreciate them. It's a low income population with a high need. I was happy to work in this setting. And as a clerkship director for emergency medicine, I felt the power, and I highlight director, not the power, the responsibility of educating all of Arkansas in emergency medicine. This was my task, and I would get credit for it if I was successful. And so I added all the best practices I had. I scrapped the clerkship. We do simulation on Tuesdays. We're at procedure day. They learn how to do chest tubes, central lines, intubation, and lumbar punctures on the first day of their rotation. Then they do a sim the next week. Don't tell them this, but they're going to treat a heart attack. They're going to have to run a code. And then the following week, they're going to treat a motor vehicle collision, and that person's going to have every element that comes with motor vehicle collisions. And this is going to happen before they get into a clinical setting and actually have real patients. They also have food pantry volunteering, a lot of other social medicine initiatives that I was able to implement. Thankfully, it will now be a mandatory clerkship in 2028. I'll touch every student who comes through Arkansas, and I'm very proud of that. And then lastly, I'm sorry getting to this a little late, but I'm the clinical director for Project Heal. Project Heal is a hospital-based violence intervention program. It basically tries to intervene on the population at their most vulnerable moment when they're in the hospital after being shot, and they have a couple ways in which they do this. These are some diagrams that we like to advertise. Project Green, Project Heal is a lime green in everything we do, so there's a lot of lime green here. But there's a brief bedside intervention. We have peer support. That is, we found a member of their community. We hired them, somebody who's also been shot, to come talk to these people and try and retain them in our study and try to talk through what they're going to need. Also, we're proud that we're hiring a member of the community. The average income or median income in Arkansas is about $23,000 or $26,000. This is like a $40,000 job. This member becomes a pillar of their community. And they are locked in. They're incredibly effective. It's been powerful. Every week we talk about these patients, these participants. And it's also studied. You got to get funding for things like this. I have a UG3, UH3 grant, which is implementation science. I won't be able to go through in depth here. I want to give all credit to Dr. Nikita Lovelady in the top left corner. She's a PI and the one who birthed this project through her PhD dissertation. Maybe 6 years ago in 2018 is when it first started. And now it's a full functioning, there's 10 team members. I get to be a clinical director, and I pay homage to her. I want to talk one more time. I mentioned this at the beginning of the speech and in my speech at the beginning of the lecture, how much it means to me to have an impact on the individual participants in this program, more so than the data that gets me the funding. And any scientist will have to start to cope with what you're doing and how do we fund it and how do I prove that it's worthwhile, when the real way to prove it's worthwhile is talking to the people who receive the participant. And so without further ado, I open up to questions. I hope I have some time for it. Please. Please.
You mentioned the pit briefly.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask how you feel about the pit. I don't have much time, but how you feel about social medicine in general and its portrayal of the medical industry, whether there's a positive or negative light of that, and particularly shows like the pit.
I don't watch TV that much, so I haven't seen The Pit. I got a job, so I'm kidding. But I hear it's very accurate and it depicts our job, and I appreciate that. And really, I think I get a little queasy and insecure that I come to you and somebody who's sick and came to me vulnerable, I'm using that story to educate you, or that's fine, but to get accolades or to get applause or worse, entertainment. But it's a movie show. I think it's fine. I don't have any strong opinion about it. I'm sure if I watched it, I would like it. But as far as social medicine, my big thing is I used to be a little insecure that we weren't doing much in social medicine. Like, it's because of the UG3 grant, UH3 grant, not the specific grant, but these grants require outcomes that say I changed the world. And most of the time you have to fudge the numbers to say you changed the world because the world has not changed. And I think that's changed a little bit now because I've had these personal anecdotes of what we're doing, and I'm more inspired to do it because of that. But there's definitely a period of like, what are we really doing here? Like, right? And you all face this. Public health ain't easy. It's not like you're gonna walk in and bam, I fixed every problem that's been here for 50 years. You're gonna do it slowly but surely, and you're gonna have to cope with how that's effective for you.
One more question? And you can also come down.
I'll be here all day. Yeah, absolutely.
So for undergraduates like us, right, how can we be more involved in advocating for social medicine?
I think you need to get a degree. I think you need to become a doctor, and then I'll see you at the end of the road and we can use you at that point. Nothing is gonna be more powerful to the revolution than you becoming a doctor and finishing, or a PhD, or finish your training. And then we're gonna really use you. But I would say dive in here in your own education. Exposure is gonna be very powerful. These experiences that, how do you become, your administrative hygiene, your email game, your ability to talk to people, all that's being developed right now. So just work on yourself right now. I'd say that's most powerful to us. A lot of students ask me this question. I'm like, you gotta get a degree, homie. I can't help you until you get a degree, and so.
One more
Courage, thank you.
So you mentioned about how we should look for mentors at any place.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you mentioned was that when you stepped away from, not necessarily stepped away, but turned your attention back to communities that you can directly impact.
Yeah.
Now, one of those things that made you turn away, that made you focus on where you could have the most impact, was this sort of like knowledge that I can do more stuff here. And I was wondering, advice that you would give to us when we're looking for, because I feel like that, especially in a university setting, it's very easy to get very lofty ideas that we might dream, at the convocation yesterday, dreams that maybe we're not quite equipped yet to touch, and it can be harder to miss those smaller things that we can actually affect. So do you have any advice for finding and looking for these sort of things that we can actually tangibly do, rather than just focusing on bigger things that are a lot further away from us?
First, that was a beautiful rendition of points I made in my lecture with almost better words than me. I appreciate you for being locked in enough to do that, or to repeat that back to me. Two, I would say keep dreaming. You definitely should be dreaming. Have these lofty ideals. I'm still trying to live up to the person I thought I was going to be 20 years ago. And I appreciate that person for setting these expectations of me. But every day I'm getting closer. But thank goodness I have these lofty hopes of myself, because I'm not getting paid. I was originally 10% for Project Heal, and I'm down to 2.5, and I wouldn't stop. I would do this job for free. Some of these things I'm just passionate about, and I'm grateful to be passionate about it. It's not like I'm better than somebody else. It's just I'm doing what I want to do, and it just happens to be what other people, helping other people. And so I would say keep dreaming, keep working. You want to rush the process, but the process is the part that we're here for. Like, you can't rush through your life. If I took all the worst parts of the chapter out, I wouldn't have any life before me. And so you gotta go through this step. You gotta learn how to answer your emails. You gotta learn how to show up on time. You gotta learn how to be dependable. You gotta learn how to take tests, and that's part of this process.
Thank you.
Let's give Dr. Ellis a round of applause.
That's crazy. Oh, thank you. This is beautiful.
Okay. Thank you. We really appreciate his time, and like he said, he'll be here to answer some questions, so please feel free to come down.